Hey, and welcome back to the podcaster's journey. My name is Kaleb, and on this podcast, we try to tackle things to help podcasters grow and do so sustainably in a way that's going to stick for them. And today we're tackling a topic that's one of the biggest questions I hear from podcasters, especially ones that are just starting out, who've just launched their show, and they're starting to wonder, how do I actually grow this thing? And more specifically, should I be paying for ads, or should I just keep going with the organic route? And maybe you've asked that too. Maybe you've looked at your downloads and checked your analytics and thought, do I need to just throw some money at this? I know that seems to be a thought that I have that I'm like, that would make sense. That would be the quick way to make this work. But here's the thing that I've found over the past week or so, researching and reading and trying to understand this better, is that only 7% of podcast listeners discover new shows through paid ads. That's kind of dismal. So that makes it sound like, well, I guess throwing money at this really isn't going to work. And that stat comes from the Edison Research Infinity Dial report. So if paid ads aren't even a major discovery method, then why are they such a hot topic in the podcasting world? That's what we're unpacking today in this episode. And I pulled data from Reddit case studies, ad platforms, reports, and podcast marketing experts to help us make sense of this whole thing. And by the end of this episode, I hope that you're going to walk away with clarity, and I hope that you're going to understand when it might make sense for you to use ads and how best ways to keep growing your show that leads to sustainable and long-term growth. So let's jump into it today. So let's start with what makes paid ads so tempting. Like we already alluded to earlier, it's the speed of it. We can throw money at the problem and we just get visibility. The idea that you can spend the right amount and listeners just come on in the door and you've got this bustling bunch of stats. But real world results paint a very different picture for us as podcasters. So I've got some examples that I found this week. One podcaster spent around $370 on an Overcast ad, and they got only 26 new subscribers. So that's about $14 per subscriber. And that's kind of expensive if you're trying to buy your way into listens and buy your way to the top of the podcast charts. Another person spent $350 on Podcast Addict and got only 13 subs. That's nearly $27 per subscriber. And as there was another one that I came upon where there was a Spotify campaign and it delivered over 19,000 impressions. So 19,000 people saw that, and it only had 5 plays for the whole podcast episode. So that was about $200 spent for 19,000 people to see it and only 5 people to play it. So that doesn't make sense. Another podcaster spent $146 on Pocket Casts and got 0 subscribers. These aren't outliers. These are the typical stories that I was coming across in my research as I was looking, and ones shared by creators in spaces like Reddit's podcasting and in Buzzsprout's ad tests. This was a common story and theme that I was coming across as I was researching this. And here's the takeaway. Paid ads can sometimes generate a nice spike in our downloads, but that doesn't mean that they're bringing you loyal listeners. Most often than not, those downloads vanish after the ads run out. So it really becomes this thing of, do you want just the vanity metrics and boost your ego, or do you want sustainable growth? That's where this conversation starts to lead us. So, and the picture that was painted for me is that unless you've got a strong foundation in place for your podcast and a way to turn attention into retention, ads might just be a temporary sugar rush for your podcast, not the actual benefit you're looking for. So let's talk about some prerequisites before spending a dime on your podcast, where you need to be to set yourself up for success. If you're thinking about starting ads, then let's talk about some prep work, where you need to be. Because this is where most ad budgets go to die. If you don't have it set up correctly, you're just literally throwing money to the wind. Or you could light it on fire. It's going to be about the same. Step one that you have to have in place is you have to know your listener. You have to have that ideal listener avatar already in place. You have to know their demographics, their psychodemographics, not just surface level stuff like their age and gender, but what they care about, the decision-making process they go through, kind of just painting a picture of how they're going to react to stimuli in the world and what they're consuming, what problems they're trying to solve, what other podcasts they already listen to. Those would be great things to have nailed down before you ever think about spending any money on ads. Step two is to make sure that your show is already converting organically. Are people sticking around? Are they naturally wanting more of your show? Are they reaching out to you? Are you starting conversations with your podcast? Are they following your podcast or subscribing to your email list? If not, ads are not going to help. Again, they will help you potentially get that sugar rush we talked about, or this boost for your ego. But when it comes to sustainable podcasting, it's not going to help. Step three is to have a way to track your results. Unique links, promo codes, landing pages, those are all essential ways that you can understand these listeners that are coming in and understand where they came from, so that you can understand. The reason we want that is we want to be able to know where these people came from, and we want to understand if they came from the ads. We want to understand that, and we want to know when we're interacting with them, how far the ad journey is going for them. Are they coming in and they're just listening real quick and then they're sloughing off from us, or are they actually sticking around? Are they becoming a part of our community, or is it something that's integral into their life now? And finally, step four, we want to choose the right ad platform. When I started this research and began preparing for this, I was just thinking broadly like, oh, we would just throw ads on social media. But as I got into it, I found that there's right places to put our ads, and there's wrong places, or maybe not right and wrong, maybe more effective and less effective. Podcast ads, app ads like Overcast or Podcast Addict typically outperform broader platforms like Spotify or Instagram. And that's simply just because the intent that people are on. Like if I'm scrolling Instagram, if you're scrolling Instagram, you're probably watching reels. You're not really looking for a long form piece of content. You're looking just to maybe grab some information or entertainment quickly in 30 seconds to a minute. You're not really looking for a 20 to 30 minute to a 60 minute interview and a podcast about a conversation. So there is a place for social media when we're trying to grow our podcast audience, but trying to place ads there probably isn't the best place. And the reason these other places like Podcast Addict or Overcast do really well is because people are already there for the intent of listening to podcasts. So if they're listening to podcasts and they're already consuming that kind of content, and then they see more content that fits what they're interested in consuming, and that's the mode they're already in, just a much higher likelihood of being able to convert those kinds of people and bring them over to your show. So if you're going to test ads, you got to be precise. Got to know who you're sending them to. You got to think about where you're going to be sending them, where you're going to connect with these people. Know your audience and speak directly to them. So that's kind of how we set ourselves up for ads. Let's talk about how we can do organic growth that actually works, because this is something that I talked about in the last couple episodes, the 7-11-4 rule from Google. So let's talk about this long game, the organic growth. Another way that you could think about this is, as I came across as I was researching this, is you can think about organic growth as like the marathon. And you can think of paid ads as a sprint. In organic growth, I mean, you probably have heard the analogy that the tortoise wins the race. The slow growth is what's sustainable. These long, short, fast bursts of energy from ads just don't seem to convert into ways that are sustainable. So according to the Edison Research, let's talk about organic growth. 30% of podcast listeners discover new shows through search. So if we're thinking about setting our show up for organic growth and how we do that, then we need to really be optimizing our show for people finding us through search. 19% of people find a new podcast through word of mouth, 17% through social media, and only 7% through paid ads. I mentioned that at the beginning of the show. So ads are really low on where people are going to actually find a show that they're really excited about and that they're going to stick with. So where should we be putting our energy if we're trying to figure out organic growth? I kind of already alluded to it when we talked about the 30% of podcast listeners discovering new shows through search. And that is SEO optimization. We want to make sure that our episode titles, our show notes, and even our transcripts can help get us found, and that those are pointing people in the direction to actually tell what the episode is about, and in a way that's going to communicate well with search engines. And major bonus points, like we talked about last week about repurposing. If you're repurposing your content, your transcript, your episode into blog posts, into newsletters, different things like that. So secondly, that's the first thing that we want to do with this organic growth is SEO. Second is we want to have adaptive content. So think of guests and topics that stretch your reach, like featuring different generations or creating episodes that tie into trending cultural topics. An example I found of that would be Hootsuite's Game of Social Thrones campaign. It was clever and relevant and instantly clickable, because everybody was talking about Game of Thrones at that time. And third is going to be repurposing. One episode can turn into 5 different content pieces: audiograms, reels, carousels, YouTube shorts. And we talked about this last week and how to do it. Different tools like Riverside, Descript, Opus Clip can really make that a lot easier and more manageable than trying to go through and figure those out by yourself. And the fourth thing that we can do to really ramp up our organic growth is community building. So if you have the bandwidth, creating a Discord or a circle group or a Facebook group that you can offer deeper connections. But if you're short on time, start with just an email list, something that you can send out more value to the listeners and just have a touch point with them once a week based off of the content that you're already making in the podcast episode. It's direct, you own it. That's the problem with some of these other community building places like a Facebook group, is you don't really own your connections. You're reliant on Facebook not changing anything and not changing how you can connect with these people. But if you have an email, it's your channel and it has an incredibly high return on investment over time. So I want to remind you that this organic growth can feel really slow, but they trickle and compound into something really big for you over time. Each one of these is just a small drop in the bucket, but after 100 episodes, all those drops really start to add up. If you think of each one of these options as one drop, and then you multiply that by 5 or 6, that's 5 or 6 drops every episode, and you do 100 episodes, now you have 5 or 6 to 700 drops in your bucket by the end of 100 episodes. So it is a long-term vision, and it's something that we really need to set our sights on, that we're in this, it's an ultra marathon. This is not a sprint by any means, and there's not really any way to speed up getting to the finish line with your podcast. Building an audience a real audience that trusts you and engages with you and sticks around, that is a long-term goal, and it takes time, but it's so worth it. Real quick before we move on, I want to touch on SEO one more time and just drive home the point of how powerful that can be. In the research, I found that YouTube is one great place to be discovered for your podcast. And what I discovered there through that is, or was reminded rather of, is that YouTube is owned by Google. So Google being the biggest search engine in the world, arguably AI is changing the game there, and that's yet to be seen how that's going to settle out. But still, most people are still searching through Google. We're in an interesting time where there's going to be a shift, but most people right now are still searching through Google. And Google is tied to YouTube, and YouTube being one of the biggest places for people to discover podcasts. Even if you don't have a video podcast, like this, I still think it's worth it to get your transcripts and get your SEO-driven titles and show notes and podcast onto YouTube, even with a static image in the video, just so that you're indexed in the search engine so that people can find you. It's so crucial and so important. So we've talked a lot about, maybe kind of painted a negative picture for ads, but I want to talk about how ads can work, because I want to be clear, I'm not anti-ads. There is a time and a place for paid promotion, and I've found that in the research. And if your show is already performing well, if you have a strong call to action and a strong offer that converts listeners into leads and customers, if your audience is dialed in, your funnel is ready, these are all things that we've talked about in previous episodes, then paid ads can absolutely help you scale. But think of paid ads as maybe gasoline for your fire. If you don't have a fire already lit, you can pour as much gas as you want onto the fire. It's not going to go anywhere because the fire hasn't been lit yet. And we have to have some of these things in place. And it's key to use our ads to amplify what's already working. It can only amplify what's already working. It's not a silver bullet. It's not something that's going to rescue what isn't already performing well. It's there to help retarget warm traffic, boost top performing content, and we've already talked about it, but just think of it as fuel for the fire, not the actual engine or not the actual wood that's burning. So that brings us to what I think is the best solution when it comes to podcasting, and that is the hybrid growth strategy. And that is this idea where we have a strong foundation on organic growth, and then we're also thinking strategically about how do we bring more people in, because we need that slow, methodical growth of trust and retention that organic growth is going to bring. But we also want sometimes to add fuel to the fire and bring more people through the door. But we want to make sure that we have everything set up correctly so that when those people come through the door, we're capitalizing on the people that are coming in. Because we've already seen how expensive it is to get leads, listeners, into our podcast. It's anywhere from $14 to $30 a lead to get them, or a listener, to come through the door and listen to our podcast. So if they're clicking on our ad, we want to be really dang sure that we have our ducks in a row so that that person is going to get bang for their buck when they come in, that they're going to make a connection, that they're going to find value, and that they're going to join your funnel or your flywheel. Because once they have that in place, then they can continue and keep going with you. But it doesn't really make sense if we don't have that. The rule, or there's not really like a one size fit all that I found in the research. But what I found is that we want to spend about 80% of our time building organic assets, our content, our community, our brand, and then test 20% of your budget on a small strategic ad campaign. If you find something that clicks, double down on it, scale it. If not, you haven't burned your whole budget. You've got something to fall back onto. This gives you the best of both worlds. Consistent growth from the organic side, plus the accelerated reach that you want to expand your visibility from the promotional side. I've seen there was other parts that said 50-50, and some people even said time 50-50, like 50% of your time on your content and your promotion, and then 15% of your time on your ads and building that sort of assets as well. But right now, for small podcasters, specifically who are like entrepreneurs, coaches, solopreneurs, creatives, trying to augment their business and grow trust through a podcast, and you're getting less than 50 downloads a week per episode, I would say really focus like 80 to 90% of your time on your organic growth, and then add your promotion on top of that. I do want to say here as well, it's not something I added to the outline, but it's something that is popping into my head right now as I'm talking, is that if you are doing ads, there does come a couple caveats with that. I looked into how much money you need to be spending to make it worth your time, and how much time you need to give it to kind of grow. let's start with time. You would think that with ads, you would just be able to kind of do it real quick, and that would be good to go. Like give it a week or so, and you're going to see results. But that's not the case. From what I've seen, we need to give it like at least a month of pouring money into ads to kind of see any kind of spike in downloads or anything like that. To give the ad engine enough time to really kind of optimize the ad and make sure it's delivering it to the right people. So really, if you can give it 1, 2, 3 months, if you are going to do an ad, it's best to do that. I also found that let's talk about price for a minute now. If you are interested in doing ads, anything under $100, I found in the research, isn't really worth your time and money, kind of really just throwing that money away. And it's better to save up so that you can do a higher cost campaign. So the research I found is anywhere from $300 to $500 a month. So really, you're going to need to have cash outlaid for, if you're like me and like to do things ahead of time, you're going to want to make sure that you have, $900 to $1,500 laid out ahead of time so that you have the money to finish that campaign, or you're able to sustain that over a few months. But again, remember, that's a lot of money to pour into your show. It's fantastic. What I would recommend first is maybe if you have $500 a month to spend on your podcast, maybe start with spending $300 to $400 of it on a VA and start building your systems and building your resources and building the value totally for free to give away at the start, just so that you can get people on your email list and get a really robust system that captures listeners and captures leads. And then, or maybe even spend the whole $500 on that for a few months. And once you have that really dialed in and you're already starting to get some organic growth, some organic touch points with people, then cut that budget back to maybe half, $250 on the VA, $250 on the podcast, and then the other $250 on ads, or $300. Cut it way back and do that for a few months to pour more people into the podcast and to try to capture those people. Again, it's not a silver bullet, and really what I found in the research is that it's better just to go with the organic and figure that out. So I think that kind of wraps up the hybrid growth strategy and how to do the ads, how I would recommend doing ads. I do want to caveat here, I haven't done any of this myself. This is purely research of what I've found. I have toyed with the idea in my head of running ads, and this has been really enlightening for me to know when it makes sense for me to do ads. So let's talk about what to measure and what not to measure as far as metrics when we do ads, to understand, are we getting the benefit that we need? Downloads are only the beginning. They're basically a vanity metric, and they're not going to tell us if we're actually growing with our podcast. They're not going to tell us real growth. We need to look much deeper. We need to track subscribers or follower growth. If you're on YouTube, that's easy to find your subscribers, see if that's going up. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they have an easy way to track who's following you, who's listening. You track those, keep track of that, understand which direction that's going. If it's not going up and you're spending money, it's something you want to look into. Listen through rates and average consumption, that's a harder one to nail down. On YouTube, not a problem, easy to see. That's another reason I would recommend being on YouTube. On some of these other platforms, it's a little harder to nail down the average consumption or how far listeners are getting before they drop off. Website visits, email signups, lead magnet downloads. These are those things where we want to have specific URLs and links that we've put in the show notes that people are actually clicking from, so that we can understand the traffic that people are getting. That'll tell us if it's going to make sense for the podcast to keep going. And then promo code usage. And finally, if we're doing this for the business, business impact. Are people booking sales calls? Are they buying products? Are they joining your programs, etc.? Paid ads might give you visibility, but without the follow through and all these systems that we've kind of outlined briefly here, it's just noise. It's not actually helping you. Organic listeners tend to engage more, stay longer, and convert better. So it's not that paid is bad. We just want to help convert these They're basically cold leads when you purchase a listener or purchase them through ads. They're cold, and we want to figure out how to warm them up and how to make them stick around longer and go from a purchased listen to a super fan, essentially. So to wrap it up, here's the truth. Paid ads can work. There's nothing wrong with them, but they only work if your strategy is squeaky clean and it's already in place and working. If you've done the work of building a solid foundation, defined your audience, defined your message, defined binge-worthy content, and created it, then paid ads might be the right accelerator for you to help push things ahead. But if you're still early, still experimenting, still getting clear on your message, still figuring things out, focus on your organic first. That's where I'm at right now. I'm still trying to nail some of this stuff down. I think I'm getting close to where paid ads would be helpful, but I'm still figuring out some of these things. Content being one of them that I need to still I feel like I need to get nailed down a little bit. So here's my challenge for you. What's this week? What's one small organic growth experiment you can try this week? I'd love to hear about it. Put it in the comments or shoot me a message on Instagram, a DM. That would be fantastic. And let's talk about it. Maybe it's optimizing your titles for SEO. Maybe it's posting one quote from your episode like we talked about last week. Maybe it's starting your email list and creating a place where you can capture those. And second, what is one piece of insights you could gather about your current listener that would help you run better ads in the future? If you do want to run ads, I challenge you to start thinking about these things. Start there, and the rest will come. Thanks for being here. If this episode gave you clarity, I just invite you to pass it on to another podcaster, asking them the same questions. We're all trying to figure it out, and we grow better together. So until next time, happy podcast.